talking about the creation of the universe and how it started. There is the scientific point of view, and we are concerned in talking about the Quranic point of view of the same stage. Starting with what Professor Alan Guth said about how the inflation started. He described that the inflation started after the Big Bang, and the cause of starting the inflation was the quantum activity in the universe. And he described that the most popular or most known theory about how the quantum activity was, it was a theory maybe explained by several scientists. One of them is Professor Lawrence Krauss. His theory about there is something in the nothing, or the virtual particles that pop up in our universe. So, while talking little about this virtual particles, he explains that the virtual particles existed when there was no space-time curvature, or prior to the Big Bang, and by the quantum gravity that could attract these subparticles and make them pop up in our universe. Well, this has differences with the Quran point of view, because the Quran says that the super force, or the forces of the universe, separated from the primordial water, which is the virtual particles part of it, or makes it, they were separated by a stormy wind. So there has to be a stronger power than the stormy wind that can make the virtual subparticles pop up in the universe. Briefly, this force, stronger than the stormy wind, is a product of the annihilation of what we call the matter and antimatter, and that kind of force is a wind force. Like every time the annihilation happened between two matter and antimatter subparticles, there is a spark goes when this spark goes off, there is a wind blow produced. The other thing that the annihilation produces is a foam, a result of the subparticles after getting annihilated. But the wind blows, which are named the accumulative, sparks, sterilized wind blows, they are the cause of the Big Bang. Now, how did that happen? They are accumulative because every annihilation happened between each matter and antimatter. A wind blow exists. Another one, another wind blow, another one, another wind blow. So they accumulate together to produce a big wind made of these wind blows. It is sterilized because the source of these wind blows do not exist anymore, just a result of it, which is, or resultant of it, which is the foam. Now, every time a wind blow, an accumulative spark sterilized wind blow exists, it is powerful enough just to split the subparticle of the gravity from the superforce. Combine it with the time subparticle, creating the spacetime. Every time one wind blow exists, separates or splits a subparticle of the gravity, combine it with the time, creating until the entire space-time curvature existed. At this stage, these wind blows were not strong and stormy. They were just powerful enough to create the space-time curvature, but not powerful enough to make the virtual particles to pop up in this universe and be confined by the space-time curvature. Yes, this is how the Quran explains how the virtual particles popped up in our universe and started the Big Bang. The second stage that Professor Alan Guth talked about is that the inflation started after the Big Bang and there was expansion. There was expansion before the inflation. This idea he is talking about is like goes along with what the Quran says. The Quran says that the sparks wind blows, accumulative sparks wind blows, were not powerful and stormy in the beginning, just to split subparticles of the gravity and create the space-time curvature. This is the expansion stage of the Big Bang, before the inflation. But when these sparks wind blows accumulated hugely, like after all the annihilation happened and finished, there was nothing more to annihilate. These accumulated sparks wind blows became very great and powerful enough to split the gravity from the superforce and make the virtual particles to pop up in our universe and confined in this space-time curvature. When the accumulated sparks wind blows become very stormy and active, it becomes stronger than the stormy wind that separates between the space-time, separates between the virtual particle or the primordial water and the superforce. Now, the Quran, with the description given by Professor Alan Guth so far, they are equal. Next, Alan Guth says like the inflation started just because the gravity, which is by its nature attractive, can be repulsive. It can be repulsive if there was a negative pressure. The positive pressure will produce the attractive gravity. The negative pressure will produce the repulsive gravity. But he related the existence of this negative pressure to the quantum stage of the universe. It what started this negative pressure that could start the inflation. Now, this point, according to the Quran, it says it in a little different way. Now, we have the accumulative sterilized sparks wind blows. These became active and powerful enough to make the gravity split from the superforce, and by that it could make the subparticles, virtual subparticles, pop up in our universe. That means it could gather between the gravity force and the virtual subparticles. When they are in touch, the gravity will attract the subparticles and make them pop up in our universe. So I didn't see anything say about the repulsive or attractive gravity. I understand it from the Quran this way, and similarly as Professor Krauss said about the quantum gravity, how it could attract the virtual particles. Now, Professor Alan Guth said the universe was smooth and symmetrical, and the inflation could confirm that that smoothness and symmetrically or symmetrical stage to the end of the inflation. So after the inflation, the universe was still symmetrical and even. Now, what the Quran says about that? About creating the sky which is the space-time curvature. The Quran describes that the first thing Allah created the sky, then lifted it up, then He made it even. But before the stage of creating the sky, it was even as well, because when the universe started, it was the super force in the center, the stormy wind surrounded it, that controlled the primordial water spreading in this universe. So this stormy wind made the universe even and symmetrical. They were just looks like three rings inside each other. They were symmetrical. And when the sky was created, the first thing, it was created by the sparks wind blows, and started the expansion by that, creating the space-time curvature. Creating the space-time curvature, we already described it as this power of the accumulator sparks wind blows could split the subparticle of the gravity and combine it with the time subparticle, creating the space-time curvature. And when creating the space-time curvature ends, the inflation starts. With the inflation start, it is named in the Quran as the lift of the sky, the lift of the thickness of the sky. Lifting the thickness of the sky made the gravity split out of the super force, and whatever subparticles, virtual subparticles, existed to pop up in that space-time curvature or inflating space-time curvature and be confined in it. The third stage, the Quran tells about creating the sky or the space-time curvature after the lift up. It was making that sky even. Making it even, that means when at the end of the inflation there was still ups and downs, and the Quran tells that these up and downs were eliminated by making the sky even. Now we just described how the inflation theory works, and how described briefly by Professor, I described it briefly and as told by Professor Alan Guth, and how the universe started according to the quantum physics. So there are so many things so close to each other between the science and the Quran telling about this stage of creation, and there are differences need to be reconsidered and studied again, and maybe a good solution on how the universe started will be found out. Thank you for your listening. Thank you very much.